Listen, when COVID-19 became a pandemic back in 2020, there were a lot of comparisons to the flu pandemic of 1918, which killed 50 million people worldwide, 675,000 in the US. You don't have to go back too many generations to hear what it was like. We actually interviewed a woman who had COVID, who also lived through the Spanish flu in 1918. She was more than 100 years old.
I was gonna say.
Yeah. But now there's a new book that tells one country doctor's experience treating people during that time, and it's called When Winter Came. And Mary Beth Santor Obermeyer is the author of that book, and she joins us now. Here's a look at that book right now. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I was just saying before we came back on that I thought that when I started reading the book, I thought it was just going to be about maybe a history lesson of what that pandemic was like. But this is more about your grandfather. It's a memoir, and you got to know him and track his trials and tribulations as an immigrant very closely in this book. What was that like?
Well, I had some advantages in that my father's hobby was electronics, and so he was taping this grandfather every time he spoke. And my grandfather was a storyteller. And he also came over on Sunday afternoons after 1950 with 3 daughters, and then those 3 daughters, my father, and he would talk and tell stories on each other. And I'm 12, you know, and well, I want to hear these stories.
Yeah.
And so that was fortunate. And when you say history, when Mayo Clinic Press got a hold of this book, my editor, Matthew Dacey, is a historian,
Yeah.
and it was wonderful how he would go in on the science points in the book, the chronic earache and Luxembourg at 11, and well, the flu. You know?
Right.
So this is history, but it is a story.
Yeah, absolutely. So your grandfather came over from Luxembourg as an immigrant, and he was an MD, worked for Mayo Clinic, correct?
No.
Or no, he was in northern Iowa in a town called Tatanka.
Tatanka, right. Well, he came from Luxembourg and went to medical school in Chicago.
Right.
And from there, he wanted his small town back again. And so he was needed on the Iowa prairie, and he went. And when he got there, the people were afraid to do surgery. And he would say, my heart break, because someone would die because he can't take out their appendix. So then he went to Mayo Clinic. He discovered it. And he's on one of their first registries of a visiting doctor. And
Wow.
he represents doctors across the country who came there.
Now, everybody at home watching just went through a pandemic. We all know somebody who passed away, perhaps, from that. What are the comparisons between what it was like a century ago going through the Spanish flu?
Well, we started editing this book at Mayo before the pandemic.
Wow.
We thought it was kind of around 1918, or it could have been, but we were just after that. Then we found ourselves in our own pandemic. Everything Pierre tries to do, we find ourselves, and we're seeing the same problems come up. They don't want to wear a mask.
Yeah.
They don't want to leave the patient. They don't want to isolate them. Same thing happening all over again. But this is in the book. On
Yeah,
how,
yeah.
and he was ahead of himself doing that. That's why he was so successful that he was Iowa's General Practitioner of the Year.
You must be so proud.
Oh, well, I've always been proud of him. And my father, who was a pediatrician. He drove the sleigh when he was 12.
Well, I also just want to say, like, it must have been a treat to get to know your grandfather in that way. Most of us don't have the opportunity to know our descendants in such an intimate way, and to see how their trials and tribulations to become an adult and to grow. So that must have been special.
It was. He also passed on his Luxembourgish heritage with little bits. He spoke 5 languages.
Yeah, I read that.
So we were getting his little stories and got that too. And so it was wonderful.
Mary Beth, thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. We're very, very grateful. And I encourage everybody to pick up the book and read it, because it is it's a wonderful read. When Winter Came is available wherever books are sold. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.